Hello, and welcome to the Omnex webinar, Reverse FMEA, a method to confirm risk. Today's webinar is being presented by Michael Down. Michael Down is a senior consultant with extensive engineering, quality, and reliability experience. Mr. Down has experience working in the automotive industry from manufacturing and assembly to vehicle design, development, and software hardware reliability, FEA, and PFMEAs. He has spent over 32 years working for GM in the quality engineering and statistical problem-solving field. During this webinar, if you have any questions for Michael, please enter them in the QA box, and Michael will get to them to the best of his ability at the end of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, and someone from Omnex will reach out to you after the webinar with how to access the recording and all of the slides. All right, Michael, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Reverse FMEA is a tool to identify areas of improvement that involve the PFMEA process. It's an evaluation of the potential risk. So the purpose of doing the reverse FMEA is to confirm the rankings and ratings that we put into our PFMEA to make sure that our preventative controls are doing what we said they would, and the occurrence level we gave it was appropriate. And it looks at the way that we looks at the control plan and the checks that we do and the gauging that we do. And again, we're going to evaluate the effectiveness during the reverse FMEA process and make sure that our detection ranking is appropriate. The reverse FMEA uses all the set of charts that are involved with PFMEA. So the process flow diagram, the PFD, the process FMEA, failure mode and effect analysis, and the process control plan. And prior to being able to run the reverse FMEA, we have to review these documents and make sure that they're complete and done correctly, because that would be the first stage in improvement, is to make sure that all that documentation matches what's out on the floor and has substantive material within the document to be used in the future for knowledge and design understanding of our processes. The focus of the FMEA is on a specific line and a single operation per day. You don't do a reverse FMEA and say, well, we're going to do line 30 and we're going to do the whole thing on Tuesday. That you're not supposed to do that. One of the strategies is that when we're doing reverse FMEA, that we're not disrupting production. So since a process FMEA is a preventative analysis, it's usually done, the first PFMEA could be done months before launch. And then eventually we do the pre-launch PFMEA, and then we have our production PFMEA, but that's done right prior to launch. So what we're starting to see is OEMs are becoming concerned that these controls that we have in place may not be as effective as we thought they would be. And that whole purpose of submitting the PFMEA during PPAP is to say that this control plan that we have that's associated with the PFMEA will guarantee that you won't see a bad part. And so what some of the OEMs are putting in their customer specifics is that you need to do this reverse FMEA and document that the controls in the process are effective. Now, also, as we have our team out there and we're going through the process, we're supposed to be taking what was identified in the PFMEA for like OP30 and making sure that what they identified as potential failure modes, that we don't see anything that we feel is additional. So we're going through and we're evaluating what the PFMEA saw as potential risk. And as we go through the line with a new, with a closer set of eyes or with a new set of eyes, we're going to focus and see that on whether they missed some potential risk activities. So where reverse FMEA fits in the APQP process is it happens during production. So after launch, if we get into production, then a reverse FMEA could be applied. So going back to the PFMEA, it's a disciplined approach that allows us to identify where the risk is, and it's integrated into our work design. But the reverse FMEA is basically focused on the controls, that the preventative controls that in relation to the cause of failure, and that would impact our ranking of occurrence, and then the gauging and checks that we do and where they are in the process, that would impact our detection process and values. But when we did those activities, normally you don't, you brainstorm and have a good discussion about how to rank these occurrences and detections. But in a lot of cases, we don't have physical proof. So again, process FMEA is a structured approach for improving quality and increased customer satisfaction and reducing development time. The reverse FMEA is just for confirmation. Now, what type of forms can we apply reverse FMEA? Well, reverse FMEA can be done with the old 4th edition AIG 4th edition FMEA reference document. It can be done with the new AIG VDA format. It can also be done with the SAE J1739, which is very similar to the 4th edition. Actually, it doesn't really matter what type of format procedure you use. There's no PFMEA that doesn't evaluate preventative and detective controls. And so the reverse FMEA process doesn't care what format it's working with. It's just focusing on what did you identify for your cause, the preventative controls for that cause, what level of occurrence value you gave it, the detective areas in the process, whether they're in station or out of station or end of the line, and what type of ranking did you give detection. And then what you would do is you'd want to establish some way of proving these rankings that you gave it in your PFMEA. The reverse FMEA is an 8-step process. And I want to stress this, and this is part of our training too, is it's an on-site process. This is kind of a hard process to train in the classroom, like an open enrollment, and then have people go back and apply. So the way that we set this system up is that, and we do this in the training too, is that the first scoping piece of it is a reviewing on site which line are we going to be applying this to, and then what operation in this line are we going to be applying it to. So let's say that we decide we're going to do a reverse FMEA on the grinding process, and that's OP30. And so we would want to, as we go into our team, we'd want to get a cross-functional team that's focused on grinders. We'd want to have setup people that were very expertise in it. We'd want production people. We'd want the process engineering. We want the process engineer responsible for the grinder. We want the quality people that are involved with that operation. And so the team would then get prepared, and the team preparation would be prior to going and doing the reverse FMEA, we would review the PFMEA for Op 30, and we'd make sure that the flow chart was appropriate, that the format and the information was substantive in the PFMEA, and that we had a good control plan that covered the detection processes that were in the operation that we're focused on. So one of the things that can stall a reverse FMEA is we may find out that the PFMEA wasn't done very well. We may find that there's issues in the control plan or issues in the flow chart. Well, before we can go on for a reverse FMEA evaluation, those areas of the documents have to be updated. Now, once they're updated, then we can go on and have a discussion and brainstorming session around what we're going to be observing. So we're not just going to walk out there and stand by the line. We're actually going to document some concerns and questions and things that we're looking for as we go into the grinding operation. So we'll have this review sheet that we'll set up, and then we'll also get into doing step 4, which is we'll do an observation. We'll go around and review the line, and basically the observation is standing there for a few hours, just viewing how the process is run. And then at that same time, we're running red rabbits and testing the preventative controls and detective controls. So a big piece of the preparation part of it is identifying what are the ways that we're going to test the credibility of these preventative controls and detective controls that we've set up. And then in 5, we do a debriefing. And then 6, we do any updates to the PFMEA, which could result in a update to the flow chart, the PFMEA, the control plan, and then eventually work instructions. And so then at the end, the 7 is we have activity reports, and then there's a final update if we have any for the rest of the documentation. So reverse FMEA can be looked at like this, that we flow from a list of functions and steps all the way down to recommended action. And as we do the reverse FMEA, we're evaluating the 8 steps of doing a PFMEA. So we may, when we get to our grinding operation, there may have been some recommended action that was in the PFMEA. So we would be checking to see, was that performed? And again, did that reduce our risk in doing the manufacturing operation with the grinding? So the reverse FMEA is a tool for continuous improvement, because as we do each of these reverse FMEAs on each operation, so if I had an operation that had 20 operations, op 10, op 20, op 30, but at the end I had 20 operations, it's going to take me 20 days. But at the end of it, I really focused on each of those operations, and in cases I'm going to find things that need to be improved, which then, if I'm doing better prevention, better detection, I'll get better product and parts. So again, reverse FMEA is not a qualification tool for the manufacturing process. It's more focused on the controls and the reaction to those controls. So as we look at it, reverse FMEA, and this is common to a lot of the core tools, is that we need a good reverse cross-functional team for a reverse FMEA. This is going to be a lot more focused. You know, if we normally do a PFMEA, this is going to be focused strictly on that operation that we're doing that day. And so there'll be a couple of core people on our team, depending on how the plant has their system set up. There'll be 2 or 3 core people, and then we'll have all these additional people that we'll ask to participate as we do the evaluation. I'd like to make a good point about this. The reverse FMEA belongs to the facility that we're doing the reverse FMEA. We're not supposed to walk out of that, you know, whoever is leading this reverse FMEA, and maybe it's somebody from headquarters, maybe it's a consultant. We're not supposed to walk out of that plant with the reverse FMEA. Once we're finish the review with the plant, it becomes part of the plant's documentation. So this is not something that we're supposed to walk away with. So when we look at the team should be cross-functional. They should be people that are active at that plant that we're doing the reverse FMEA. There should be at least one member of the team that's well trained and knowledgeable about doing reverse FMEAs, and the team should be informed about the product. So again, the production PFMEA is performed to identify potential risks, and this is we identify what the severity is, but then the risk evaluation is based on how often we think it's going to occur. This is for occurrence. And then the detection basically is in the control plan or in the detection column. So if we learn that we think that potentially this cause could happen more often, that might cause us to increase the level of our occurrence. And if we think that it's increased enough, that's where we're going to have to take some type of mitigating action to try and eliminate that cause of failure. So then after we have this meeting, and so if we do the training, the reverse FMEA training, the first day is spent training the cross-functional team and then evaluating all the documentation. And then we would go out and review the operation. And the first thing we would do, so we'd have to select one of the operations for the day. And then we would take the flow diagram, the PFMEA and control plan for that operation. And the first thing we do is we say, have all the potential errors been identified on that PFMEA documentation? We'd also look at the flow chart to make sure that was complete. And we'd want to make sure that in relation to the control plan, that the plant is following the control plan. So on the control plan, it says they're supposed to be taking 5 samples per hour and plotting those on a control chart. We should see that's what they're doing, and they're following what's in the control plan. So as we go through it too, we may find discrepancies. And what we're going to want to do is to introduce an issue or error, like a red rabbit, and see how long does it take the system to discover it. Now, a big warning sign on red rabbits is you want to make sure that those are controlled tightly. We don't want those to get to the customer. So we're doing this experimentation to see if the process can catch an issue. We don't want the red rabbit to get away from us. We don't want that part that we've created something that's out of specification or an issue, and place it into the process and then find out in a couple of weeks that that got to the customer. Now, once we've gone through and evaluated the system and our occurrence and detection, we may update our PFMEA. We also might identify additional failure modes, which then will result in additional lines in the PFMEA. So one of the major requirements for doing reverse FMEA, it's got to be performed on a running process. It can't be done. I mean, it can be done during ramp up and during production events, but when you do these production events, the process has to be running at rate at some time so that you can make your evaluation for the reverse FMEA. So we can take advantage of downtime and ramp ups, but we just have to be careful that the process has to be running at rate. You can't just go down there and the process is down and there's no operators and try to evaluate the ability for the process to prevent problems or to detect them. So how often should we do these? They can be affected by customer complaints. So a customer might push it. So we could have a change in process. We could have a new product that then would require us to do the reverse FMEA. We could have an internal incident. So we could have an 8D, and the 8D says that the problem occurred in 10, and during that evaluation, we could schedule our reverse FMEA as they're evaluating the problem. If we see an increase in rejects, or we may do a few reverse FMEAs in preparation for an audit, or because we got negative feedback on our audits. So reverse FMEAs work by, as this cross-functional team is looking at this operation, they're identifying, are there any new risk associated with the real life production situation where they're running at rate. We want to enhance and update any of the relevant processes that have been identified in our PFMEA, and we want to gather information and record any issues that we've seen, and then eventually this may update how we measure and gauge things and the control plan. So we select our team and train them, and then we have forms that we use to help gather our thoughts. So we have this first, which is a process review, and you'll notice that there are a couple of checkpoints. These aren't, if we look at the one and these two questions that are at the bottom, can material component reference error be generated? Can the operation be skipped or not performed? And that's just a thought starter. There could be 10 or 15 things that people are concerned about. Once you do your review, there'd be a result if it's yes or no, and then comments. And so this information in the header just talks about when we're doing it, who's doing it, what workstation we're doing it on, what's the operation, and what site are we performing the reverse FMEA. So another challenge that recently has added to doing reverse FMEAs is, what if we have some functional safety requirement for OP30? That there's something that we're doing, some characteristic that we're creating, some circuitry that we're working on that has some functional safety element. So some of the review process will be based around these functional requirements and how can we test those as we do our reverse FMEA. And then we have a checklist where we look at who, when, where, who, and then and what, and explain the scope. And so for on-site, we're checking what our observations are. And so this observation sheet would be checking, well, did we have we saw a defect, when did it happen, and what was the occurrence level of the defects that we saw? Did we see just one, or did we see multiple ones? So we have this observation report that then captures the observations from the team. So one sheet drives what we're looking for. The observation sheet says, well, what did we see when we were reviewing the process? And then finally, we have the activity report, and these would be from our observations. Are there actions we're going to take, and is that going to impact the PFMEA? So you'll notice over here, and I'll see if I can do this. You'll see this before reverse FMEA and after reverse FMEA. So at the end, are we going to modify any of our rankings based on what we saw from our observation sheet, and are we going to take any action? And so then we record all of our evidence. And see, the purpose of doing this is that once we're done with this line that we're doing this full reverse FMEA on, we have all this documentation that we can send to our customer or share with our customer. Maybe there'll be some material you won't want to share with your customer, but we'll have all of this, all these artifacts to show that we actually went through a formal review of all of the activities in the operation, and confirmed that the rankings that we gave them were adequate. So what I've seen just recently, I saw a client where all the occurrences were 3. And when I asked them why all the occurrences in their PFMEAs were 3, they said, well, look, and they had their automated form up on the TV. And they said, when we move it to a 4, we've got to take some action. So they were focusing all of their level of occurrence and their level of detection on the impact on whether they had to take some action or not. So what you're trying to do at the end of this is confirm to the customer all of the values that we have for occurrence and detection are adequate, and did we discover any new failure modes when we did our reverse FMEA review, and what kind of updates may we have done to the flow chart, to the PFMEA, or to the control plan. So in summary, the reverse FMEA is a structured approach. It normally takes 2 days, 1 day to review the documentation. And I mean, depending on the customer, you could do anything you want. You could spend day 1 reviewing the whole flow chart, PFMEA, and control plan, and making sure that's all updated, and then selecting one of the operations and then focusing on that and pulling the check sheet together. prior to doing the formal reverse FMEA. And then you'd have to plan at least 2 to 4 hours of review for each operation. So this doesn't happen in one day. This takes about a month to do justice to reverse FMEA. It's not something that you go out and, like I said earlier, and you do it all in one day. Reverse FMEA again will push continuous improvement because we're reviewing what had been done in the past in the PFMEA and confirming that, you know, we confirm that the documentation is correct, that the flow chart represents the process, that the PFMEA represents all of the failure modes that are crucial, and that the control plan is complete and it's being followed. And so that part of reverse FMEA in itself is going to help for continuous improvements of the PFMEA documentation, the flow chart, the PFMEA and control plan, and confirm that the controls are in place, that people are following those, and we've done some type of red rabbit simulation to make sure that the in process and final process detection is doing what it's supposed to do. So again, reverse FMEA will improve production robustness because we're going to make sure that either the process that we identified in the PFMEA is what we thought it was, or by the end of the reverse FMEA, we're going to have a better documentation and process in place for both prevention and detection. So again, the production PFMEA is performed to identify risk. The reverse FMEA just helps support that. So that's what I've got for today, and we'll open it up for questions. I saw one question. There is no standard for reverse FMEA. I'm putting feelers out to see if we can start something at SAE to come up with a common standard, because right now what happens is that you'll see the customer specifics and it'll say do a reverse FMEA, but it won't tell you anything more than that. It doesn't give you very good direction. Yeah, Martin, it becomes more challenging in a chemical operation and how they do it. You don't want to screw with their mix just to see if the gauging would work. So you'd have to be kind of creative in how you do reverse FMEA with any kind of a bulk material type process. That'd be a little bit more challenging. You wouldn't be able to do the same exercises that you could do with a hard machining operation or a circuit board company. Okay, the reverse FMEA drives updating, could potentially drive updating of the PFMEA. So you have the PFMEA and you put all of these preventative detective controls in it and came up with detective rankings and prevention rankings. Now all you're doing is saying, is there any way that we can verify that those actually are effective? there's a statement about you can add change in the product standard. And yeah, I mean, if it could drive a change in the internal standard documents, you may find that you may change what's in the processing documents that the process engineer has. You don't want to make this part of the process audit because it's focused on one operation at a time. And so if I'm going to do Op 30, reverse FMEA and Op 30, I'm going to do that on Tuesday. If I'm going to do an Op 40 reverse FMEA, that might happen on Wednesday. Or I might give them a day off and not do it till Thursday. So you're not supposed to, this isn't a quick walk through Op 10 through Op 80. This is focusing on each operation at a time. And one operation at a time, and you wouldn't do more than one operation a day. I don't see a huge reason for our product engineers being involved in the reverse FMEA. They could be pulled in as a technical resource if there was something found during the reverse FMEA process, but there's no huge value in having them there as we're doing the reviews. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have them come. If they want to come and they have time to stand around the plant for 2 or 3 hours, it's always good for a product engineer to do that, but you can't force it. There is not a current reverse FMEA that's done for DFMEAs. Again, it would have to be kind of creative because you'd be reviewing a design process and you'd be reviewing a validation system. And I guess you could do that, but it's going to be a lot more technical. And I haven't seen any papers so far talking about reverse FMEA and design FMEAs. Now, I have seen there is some work, and it's going to be documented soon, on doing design review on designs failure mode. So DRBFM on processes. So DRBFM is focused on design. DRBFM, they're starting to work on one where it's a process review based on failure mode. So I see that coming down the pike. So see a version of DRBFM that's process focused, but I haven't seen a design reverse FMEA coming through the pipe. I could see you using reverse FMEA on a service process because basically you can do a PFMEA, a flowchart PFMEA and control plan on any process. So if I have a process, I worked with public schools and I've worked with hospitals on doing PFMEAs, defining the process flow and what the failure modes are and what the controls are. And you could do a reverse FMEA on those if you wanted to. The templates, I don't know if we can share the templates. Those would be part of the training. And I would assume that we'd want you to go through the training before we'd share the templates, but that would be something you'd have to call the Omnex office about, because sometimes they're open to share, sometimes they're not. Based on the finding, is there a follow-up required, and what score severity will trigger a follow-up? So you normally wouldn't do a follow-up unless you had some open issues or action items from the reverse FMEA that you hadn't completed. And then if I still see some issues coming out about 30, I would have to do a follow-up review and see if something had changed. Again, there's a question about the forms. See, the problem is that since there's not a standard, the forms I have are forms that I created. But if we get a cross-functional team at SAE to develop a reverse FMEA standard, then the documents will be included with those. Yeah, if you want to be included, I'll put your name down, Chandra, if that comes up right now. It's kind of, a lot of the stuff at SAE is driven by automotive sponsors. So if I can find somebody from GM or Ford or Stellantis to sponsor it, because that's the big deal. SAE is kind of driven by automotive sponsors or aerospace or medical. It's not coming at me as a consultant and coming in and say, hey, I think we should have a standard. The first thing they asked me was, who's your sponsor? So I need to find a sponsor. No, I don't have any examples of completed audits because they can't leave the plant. I can't have a copy of them. I can talk about them, but I really can't have a physical completed. I'll work up some more for the training material, but I don't have any completed forms. We talked about the frequency of doing and conducting reverse FMEAs. That's based on how well the process is running. So if the process is running well and operations 10 through 180 are creating good parts, then I'm not going to conduct a reverse FMEA. The only thing that might drive it is that, oh, yeah, the process engineer came in and decided to make some technical changes to Op 40. But then what that's going to drive is also an updating of the flow chart, the PFMEA and control plan. So if there's any preventative controls or detective controls that are created, then I'd want to evaluate those through the reverse FMEA process. And again, you can't find the matrix stuff. We'll talk, if I get the go-ahead, whoever participated in this podcast might get an email with a Excel file with the forms in it. I'm not positive of what the typical challenges are going to be for FUSA. You caught me. I'd have to sit down and think about that for a while. So it's just going to be, if you don't have a standard process or you add some of the issues from ISO 26262 and ASPICE, that could, in FUSA, that's going to bring in some additional challenges, but it shouldn't be anything huge. I just don't have any examples. How reverse FMEA integrates into the PFMEA is that if we identify changes to the process, because that could happen in this, where you say, oh, this doesn't look like it's working well, we'll change it. Or we find that we think the occurrence is higher or that the occurrence is lower. So this could result in reducing the AP value from a high to a medium or maybe to a low, because we found that the original team had ranked occurrence or detection too high. So the impact's going to be on the occurrence and detection and potentially evaluating preventative actions, and those would impact the PFMEA. And again, I don't know about the sharing of the presentation. That's outside of my pay grade. So not sure. So that takes care of the question and answers that were in the QA box. If anybody wants to open their mic and ask questions or ask for clarification for my answers, just go ahead. I'll be here till noon.
Just so everybody is aware, somebody from Omnex will be emailing you guys this presentation to everyone.
Thank you. Well, seems like there's not any questions, or people aren't turning on. Remember, if you're going to ask a question, to unmute your mic, because we won't hear you.
They won't be able to on these types of webinars. This is just our conversation here. If they do have a question, you guys can put it in the QA here at the bottom, and we can answer
okay.
it.
Okay. So I haven't got any new questions. So again, I would make sure you review your customer specifics, because they may mention in the customer specifics that they want to reverse FMEA. It may not be reviewed when they take you as a source. So you want to make sure you check that. And I appreciate the thank yous. And we do have a two-day course that's available, but it's an on-site course. It's not an open enrollment. So if you decide you want to get the train, we come into your facility and there would be training the first day and review of the PFMEA documents, and then this and creating the questions and deciding on what process operation we're going to review. And that would be the end of day one, and day two would be doing the reverse FMEA in that operation. So part of the training would be training you on the material that we covered today, and then reviewing your documentation, and that might bleed over into day two. So it matters how long the training goes, but part of the training will be reviewing the documentation. But eventually it'll end up with a formal review of one of the operations in your facility. So I just like you to know that, because we almost tried to do the class as an open enrollment. You really can't do reverse FMEA as an open enrollment class. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this allows you at least to have a format of how to do a reverse FMEA. Like I said, I've gone into some of the customer specifics, and there's just one sentence, and it says, "Thou shalt perform a reverse FMEA," and without any guidance on what that means or what we're talking about, somebody just throws it into their customer specifics without definition. So hopefully in the next year or so, we'll get some team going at SAE to develop a standard around reverse FMEA. Yes, and the training is through Omnex. And so it may not be up on the site. You may have to call in. I don't know, some reason I heard some comment that it might have been pulled off of our Omnex site. So you may have to email or call the main office about the training. No, the plant won't be responsible for providing the check sheets. The plant will be developing the check sheet. so they'll, if we were working with the plant as Omnex, we would give you the form for creating the check sheet and work with the cross-functional team on developing the questions in the check sheet. And then when that's done, like I said, we do all the updating of PFMEAs and everything else. That reverse FMEA then becomes a part of your technical documentation of the plant. I'm not going to carry, if I was working with you and I did a reverse FMEA, I wouldn't make copies of it. I wouldn't keep copies on my computer. Once I'm done, it's an activity then that's given to the plant. And then once the plant's done a few of these, they don't have to have somebody holding their hand, then they would be creating these check sheets internally and documenting them. So I don't see any more questions. So I'm not sure, should we call it? Call it a day?
That's up to you. You can do one more call for questions, and if nobody else comments, we can call it a day.
Okay. So this is our last call, final call for questions. If you have them, put them in the Q&A box. The other thing is that if after the podcast is over, if you get a question, you can send the question to me at mdown@omnex.com, and I can answer those questions after the podcast. Well, I don't seem to be getting any more. Oh, here we go. Nope. Just thank yous and everything. So I think we're gonna call it. Thank you, Martin. Haven't seen you in a long time. Have you grown a beard or anything? So everybody have a great rest of the day and a good weekend, and appreciate your participation today with our podcast on reverse FMEA. And thank you.